Hey everyone, it's Tony Will, and I know I say the same thing every time I open a podcast, but this podcast is really special. I'm super excited. I do have the coolest people in my life, and you're going to meet two of them today. But first, let me tell you about what you're listening to. Women In is a podcast that celebrates women in all walks of life and the people in their lives who are lifting them up. You will hear from all kinds of super cool people in my life and share their stories to inspire others to support all the extraordinary women around them. This is a space to be disruptive, forward-thinking, and change agents for humankind. It is uncensored, fun, and curiosity-driven. And this is what I'm passionate about, breaking down barriers for my kids' generations. It's equal parts about my guests and the places we came into each other's lives, whether it be Mindfulness Elevated, the Kalamazoo Wings, Tony Will Coaching, or they happen to be in my family and friends circle. So like I said, I have two guests today, so this is a first. So I'm going to intro, do their bios, and then we're going to dive right in. Laura Cathcart Robbins is a best-selling author of a Tria's Simon & Schuster memoir, Stash, My Life in Hiding, and the most popular podcast, The Only One in the Room. She has been active for many years as a speaker and a school trustee and is credited for creating the Buckley School's nationally recognized Committee of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. Her recent articles on the subjects of race, recovery, and divorce have garnered her worldwide acclaim. She is the SDWF's 2024 Memoirist of the Year, a TEDx speaker, and an LA Moth Story Slam winner. Currently, she sits on the advisory boards of the San Diego's Writers Festival and the Outliers HQ Podcast Festival. And Scott Slaughter is the executive producer of the popular podcast, The Only One in the Room. He's the creator and owner of R63 Media, and he is notorious for getting your name wrong. Scott, I got that off the end of your email. The last part. So I thought you wanted the world to know that, and I share that with you. So I wanted to know that I get everyone's name wrong. So
I appreciate that. It's an ongoing thing that I'm working on, but I continue to fail at. So I beat.
And I was very proud that you put that and you own that. I love transparency and authenticity. So hello to both of you. Hi, Laura.
Hi, Tony.
We were telling you, Scott, and I put all the things in my podcast that it sounds a little low. So
Here, I'm coming back on.
Now
There you go. There you go. Yes, yes.
There we go.
Yeah, sorry. You would think as the producer I would get this right, but I'm used to the other end, actually. You know, being able to control everything.
I know. How does it feel, you guys, to be on the other side?
Well, Laura does this all the time.
I do.
Yes.
I'm interviewed a lot. Yeah. I'm interviewed a lot more than I interview.
Are you really? Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's that feels good though. I too prefer. I don't know which one I prefer. I think I prefer to be interviewed. How about you, Laura? Which one do you prefer?
I think it depends on the interviewer.
Well, I guess we're gonna see how I rank today.
Oh, I already know. You're like right up there at the top.
Oh my God, I'm so excited to have both of you on. And one of the first, I asked the same question for all my podcasts. That's the first one, and then usually all the questions I send over go out the window because we just start talking about all these other fabulous things. But where I always like to start, and I find the most fascinating, is how people meet. And our story, the three of us, it's a very interesting story. So, Laura, I'm going to throw it to you for this, and then we'll bring Scott into the fold too, because I met you guys before you met me. So,
yes. Well, so how you, me, and Scott met?
Yes.
Yes. And I forgot who connected us, Tony. Who was that?
Terry Patterson.
Terry Patterson, that's right. Yes.
She was my very first podcast guest on Women In. So
that's right. That's right. And so she interviewed me, and she interviewed me on her podcast, but she also had me come and talk to her book club, which is an amazing book club. It's a sobriety book club. And my book, Stash, My Life in Hiding, is a addiction recovery book, and it's actually a recovery book club. I don't think it's sobriety. And as we were, you know how it is when you're concluding a conversation, and it's like, but you're having such a good time, and it's like, oh, and this, oh, and that, and oh, you have to meet my friend Tony, because she is just somebody that you really want to interview for The Only One in the Room. And she pitched you basically and said, you've got to meet each other. And then she connected us via email. And you sent me, I wore it when we interviewed you. You sent me gear. You sent me hockey for her hat. What are those hats called where you have the strings that pull down over the ear?
What are those called? I'd have to ask one of my guys.
They're like little braids on each side of your head
Yeah.
almost, which is so great. I can't wait for it to get cold so I can wear it. You sent me a bunch of other stuff too. And, Scott and I were not only excited to have you on the podcast, and we loved having you on, but we were also excited that we had an opportunity to meet you in person, which doesn't always happen with our guests. So,
Yeah.
honey, I'll let you take it from there.
Well, I was going to say you followed up on that invite to have dinner like that.
Yeah.
I think it was within the 2 weeks after the interview, you were like, I'm going to be in LA. Let's have dinner. And then you Ubered all the way up here and met us in our neighborhood, and we sat down. And I think, not only was I curious about a woman who manages a professional sports team, but I became really curious about what it was like to be sober in your position. And I don't know, your advocacy for women is just interesting. I'm a big supporter of supporters, of people who advocate for other people. So that curious, and we basically had a conversation with a friend. It felt like somebody that we would just wanted to know more about, and it's just grown from there. And then obviously you said want to be on my podcast, and we had to say yes. So here we are.
My persuasion.
Uh,
I said,
yeah,
I'm like,
it was easy.
no, I really, we just hit it off. I mean,
Hmm.
the work that you both do with the only one in the room, and I live that life. 75% of my life is that. And I so applaud people who will talk about it, because a lot of people won't. And I don't think it's because, I think there's some that don't want to, but I think it's just through lack of knowledge, right? And your podcast is teaching people about what it's like to be the only one in the room and tell those stories. And I do that on a much smaller scale here in Kalamazoo with the pro hockey team. And so it was just like, because Laura, you're super passionate about diversity, equity, inclusion, and that's so how Scott and Laura came into my life. Just so you all know, I knew them before they knew me. So I read your book, Stash, and I was so excited. And Laura has kind of heard me tell this to them before when we had dinner, but I was so excited to read a book. Quit lit is what, in the world of living sober or alcohol free or whatever the language someone wants to use, that it was not from a middle-aged white woman, because there are so many of people like me who write books, and while they're wonderful books, I was like, oh my gosh, she's black, I love it, I can't wait to read this. And when you were on Terry's book club, I had a game that day, and stuff was overlapping, but I'm like, no, I'm going to be on there. And I wasn't sure the format of the call, because I was going to say, I love that you're black, and I love that you wrote this book, because most people won't say that, and I truly mean that. Like, this is another author wrote a book, and she's black, and it was on addiction, but not yours. Was more of like, here's the ugly side of this, like, and you lifted the kimono, as I like to say, and you bare it all. And then I listened to your book on Audible, and then I was like, oh my gosh, like meeting you, and then meeting Scott, because Scott's in the book, because you all met in rehab, and then just like it was just so cool. And that was like a year and a half ago, almost 2 years ago. When did the book come out again, Laura? When was that?
Yeah, March of 2023.
Yeah, so I read it last July last year, and so I knew you before you knew me, and the fact that, like, I call you guys friends is it's just so cool, and the work that you both are doing is just phenomenal. So tell me, the podcast is the only one in the room is 5 years old, correct? We were talking about that at dinner. That is a
Yes.
big deal in the podcast world. Now, I don't know a lot about the podcast world, because I decided one day I was just going to launch podcasts, and then I did it. But like some people, but talk about what started the podcast, the premise, and then talk about the legs behind it. By that I mean the 5 years worth of guests that you've had. And I also want to hear the episode, and if you get there, you probably have a lot of cool guests, but like some that stick out to you. So, because I know some of my listeners are going to want to listen to your podcast from this. So Laura, why don't you start, and then Scott, I'm sure you have different memorable guests based on the work, but
Yeah, I mean, I'll start. I'll say how the podcast started, and then Scott can talk about the 5 years. Um, and so basically, I was trying to build an author's platform. I didn't really know what that was, but I had been rejected by agents who said that I was, no one knew who I was. And so they wouldn't be able to sell my book. And memoir is the hardest thing to sell. You would think it's the easiest thing to sell, but it's not. It's the hardest thing to sell because people really have to want to read about you, which is why celebrity memoir is so popular, because people do want to read about celebrities' lives. But if they don't know me, they're not really going to care to read about me. So I was trying to build an author's platform, and I took a podcasting class. During the time I was in this class, I published my first article. The article went viral. It was in the Huffington Post. It was about being the only Black woman at Elizabeth Gilbert and Cheryl Strayed's 3 day, 600-person retreat. And that article, like I said, went viral. And I'm in this podcasting class. I'm literally in the class as the article goes live. And I'm starting to get all these hits on my phone. Like, DMs are coming in and all these things. And um, I thought Black people would respond to this article because I don't want to speak obviously for all Black people, but all the Black people I know what it's like to walk into a room and be the only one. We just do. We've all done it. We discuss it sometimes. Sometimes it doesn't even need to be discussed because we just know. So I thought they would connect to it. And what happened was when it went viral, it went all around the world, in seconds, minutes, hours, and people from everywhere started responding to it. And a lot of those responses that were sent to me were hashtag the only one in the room. And I was like, what a cool hashtag. And my podcast teacher said, what a cool name for a podcast. And so, we finished the class. I recorded a trailer. That was our big finale of the class. I had someone snap a picture of me recording it, posted it on my social media. No intention of actually starting a podcast, but I really wanted to know, what it took to do so. And someone asked if they could be a guest on The Only One in the Room, which didn't exist. And so Scott and I are talking in bed that night, and I was like, this might be something that I do. I might start a podcast. I've just taken a whole class. I know everything about podcasts. And I said, but I couldn't do it unless you would produce it for me. And, I'll let Scott tell you that part of the story on his part, but he eventually agreed. And so we set about, creating The Only One in the Room, not just from a Black woman's perspective, who's the only person in the room everywhere she goes, but that the wave of responses that I got from everyone, where there was no common denominator, except for they knew what it was like to feel alone in a room full of people. So those are the stories we decided to tell, and yeah, we set about doing that. So I'll hand it to you, hun.
Well, that you do that so well, honey. Thank you. And I'll add to that to say that I find that it is by telling stories that we connect. Um, I think part of what saved my life over time is hearing other people's stories and finding myself in their story. And from the very inception, when we began to explain the concept of the podcast to people, you could see people going internal and finding their own story immediately. Um, so we knew we had something that made sense, and I think the work was to broaden the scope of it because it had a narrow lane to it. People really thought of it as a racial sort of beginning, and so we've spent a long time building stories and trying to focus the only one idea into many different ideas, many different lanes, and I think it's worked really well. Through the years, we started the podcast by interviewing everyone in a studio, and then COVID came around, and it was a blessing in disguise because we were forced to put a studio in our home, and go remote, and that opened up interviewing to people all over the world. And it also created the ability to do a lot of different programming. Not only were we doing our 1 hour show, we started doing a lot of mini shows along the way. So at one point, I think we were producing 5 shows a week. And our production team was under the gun, and we were just over here recording the hell out of it. Like, let's do another one. Let's, have another person on. And they were just like, oh my God, like, how do we promote all this and how do we market this? And, but we did it. And that's kind of how we've gotten almost 850 episodes in that 5 years. And I think we're a little over 5 million downloads, maybe closer to 6 at this point. And the show's had, periods where it's had a lot of exposure, and then it's had periods where it's slowed down a bit, but we have a steady audience, and we have a steady flow of people who want to be on the show, and we get to pick and choose a little bit more now about the content. Instead of trying to pick content that we can promote, we can pick content that we feel like I guess has meaning to us, and that's been a real gift, I think, along the way. And that's how we kind of came into your world too. Your story popped in as something we thought the world should know.
Yeah, it's really cool because I can't remember if I talked about this on the podcast or not, but it sounds like something I say it a lot. When I walked into the doors of the Kalamazoo Wings Event Center 10 years ago, I didn't like kick down the door, rip my bra off and set it on fire and say, "Woman, hear me roar." I had no idea that I was walking into a very male-dominated world. And in fact, the first 2 or 3 years, I was just so focused on trying to turn this franchise around that I didn't really look up to see. But when you realize that, and then you start to, and for someone like me, emotions are a little harder. I tend to be a little bit more closed off. But when I started to notice I was treated differently and spoken to differently, and it really bothered me. And it's even more so and now that I'm outspoken, being the only one in the room, it's different. Like, who your supporters are. Now I just don't give a shit. I'm just like, listen, there are people that need to be heard. It's not just about me as a white woman in a male-dominated sport, but there are other things beyond that in that same room. And most people don't feel comfortable to say this stuff, so you are giving a voice and a platform to those individuals, and I just think that's awesome.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Tony.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of people.
It's important. I think people want to see into your world to see how you navigated and remain true to yourself, right? I think we all hear the story of going in and adapting yourself into a world that's not yours, but to remain true to yourself and to have your voice. I'm sure it's not easy, and you can empower people by telling your story, and give people a platform, and that, I think that's true all over, and ultimately it connects us all more. It creates more empathy and compassion along the way. So it's a small change, but I think it has a big effect.
Well, and yesterday I had a podcast guest on, and so he wrote a book. I didn't know it either. Todd Kinney. It's over there on my bookshelf. I was just looking, but he wrote a Quit Lit book, but I read his book because he was a man writing it, and he's a white man, and so Todd and I met last year at a conference. And he said, "Oh, I've heard about you. You're the woman that runs a men's professional hockey team." And I said, "Yeah." I have your book right here. And he was like, "Really?" I'm like, "Yeah. You're one of the only men writing about this. Of course I'm reading it." And so yesterday I interviewed him because when we go like Sober in the City is one of the conferences. That's where we met and where we came into each other's lives. And I said, there were, I don't know how many, hundreds of women and 2 men. And he was one of them. And I said, so he goes, never did I think I'd be like a white man walking in to see these women, and he goes, I was aware, but it was a little uncomfortable. And I said, yeah, that's why I walked up to you. And ironically, we met at the bar. Like, I went to get a cup of coffee and he was eating lunch at the bar.
That's funny.
Yeah.
Some things never change.
Right. Right. So it was interesting because what we talked about too was, especially with this podcast being called Women In, I'm not sitting here saying at all, like, I don't want to alienate half the audience, right? Like, I love men, and I say this all the time. I love them so much, I married 3 of them. And so it's
Right.
like, that's going to be the opener of my TEDx talk, by the way, as I work on that. But it's true. Like,
Please, yes.
yeah, I want men, and it's all about like collaboration. Like, men came from women. I gave birth to a son. Laura, you have 2 sons, right? Like, so it's about lifting women up and talking about the women in our lives who have shaped us to be the people we are, and how that came to be. Because oftentimes I see women make themselves small, and instead of being
Mm.
confident and have the self value and self confidence to speak up. And so that's part of why I launched this. So I want to know from both of you, and Scott, I'm going to start with you. Who are the women in your life right now that have shaped you to be Scott?
Huh. I think I answered your. I was trying to find your questionnaire that you asked. 'Cause I was like, I'm pretty sure she has my answers, but I don't remember exactly what I wrote. But I am a father of two girls. I have to immediately say my kids keep me. And what my girls have done for me that I think, in retrospect, is they've loved me no matter what. Like they've seen me no matter what, and and being in recovery, there were some no matter whats that I think adult people can't unsee, or it's more difficult. So my kids, they've both my girls. I have a 25-year-old Lily and a 20-year-old. My God, is she 21? Nora. I know, like both birthdays just
Yeah.
happened, and they're both in that age where like one's in Bali, one's been in Greece, and I don't see them, but um, empowering them to have an experience. I don't know, different than the experience I had in my 20s, and so probably where you grew up, Tony.
Hmm.
In the time period. My kids watched Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. Which is a timepiece about the struggle for women. Um, and they could not believe that that was the way it was. They would look at me after a scene like, "What?" And I'd be like, "That's how your grandma grew up. She grew up in a place that was predominantly run by men, and women were very subservient to them, and didn't have much of a say in the world. And um, to see that the world is different than that in a way that surprises them, but still they have challenges that are obscure, um, in comparison to, say, the 60s or whatever, the 70s. So they've inspired me a lot to always advocate. Laura's been a huge influence in my life. I think, back to when we were talking about the podcast and she asked me to produce, you know, I, I didn't, first of all, I naively said yes right at the moment. Oh, sure, I'll produce. And then I think I followed it up with, what does that mean? What does producing mean? And she goes, well, basically, she summed it up like this. She said, you basically do everything I don't want to do, all the other fun stuff.
That's a great
And
answer.
I laughed. I was like, yeah, that's pretty funny. But that's how it's turned out to be. And I think at that point, it was important for me to make a decision about how I was going to participate in lifting Laura up. You had mentioned, that, I come from sort of the predominant, uh, you know, gender, of our population. And I think there's a lot of sort of unspoken pressure on us to be at the top of whatever we do, men, white men. And I felt like what I really wanted to do, I really believed in Laura's writing, and I really believed in watching her achieve her dreams. And I figured out I wanted to be a part of that, not just be that, but be a part of lifting her up. So I took on the job to do whatever it took. Okay, I'll do whatever. And I don't do it willingly all the time. I kick and scream a lot. It's a lot of it goes against my learning. Uh, like I really like a lot of things organized and focused, and producing has everything everywhere. It's like pieces and parts all over the place. So for me, that's been a real challenge uh, to get better at. But at the same time, every time we reach a goal with a podcast, or I see Laura get published, or a piece goes to the New York Times, I think I feel really good about that, uh, type of support, of being a part of that. There have been a number of other women in my mom was a really wonderful example, but again, she grew up in a time where she worked in an environment that I don't think I wanted to see my kids work in. You know, but my mother had MS for her whole life and never wanted help from anybody. And by the time she passed away, I because help was the uh, being helped from her would increase her disease. It would make MS, um, sort of you know, progress, I guess. So there was a fine line between helping and giving her, allowing her her own experience. And I learned a lot about that as well, about how to be a part of all that. So, you know, in a nutshell, that I guess that's, you know, those have been the main women in my life
Yeah.
that have influenced me.
There's so much in that. And I keep little notes as I interview people, but you are the
I do that.
good. I'm on the right track.
Hmm.
First off, so I went to say this, 6 million downloads. That's fucking awesome. So congratulations
No,
to you
thank you.
guys. Maybe one day I'll be there. That's really cool. And that's a big deal. So congratulations on that.
Yeah, thank you.
But you are the definition, Scott, of what lifting a woman up is. Right
Mm,
there. And that is, and so my question to you, because I had my husband on the podcast because I'm trying to help individuals understand what it's like sometimes to be the man behind the woman instead of vice versa.
mm.
So, and without it, I'm not offending anyone, but Josh is definitely the one, although he's very outgoing but he's a foundation for me to just keep going, right? And it sounds like you're the same for Laura. So what's a glimpse inside of that look like for you? It's a hard question to answer, I know, but how do you do that? How are you hardwired to do that and know that it's like I want her to get to her dreams. I love that, by the way.
You know, I think my journey in recovery has really set me up for that. Like the real lesson for me has been that thing of being of service idea. Like if I can put others before myself, I tend to get back what I need, not what I want, and I kind of trust that process. You know, so we've been doing this 5 years, and you know, I've learned a lot about producing, and now I'm running my own production company. But I didn't know that that was going to happen when I started. So, you know, trusting that I can find what I need out of the process and support another person has been sort of the driving force behind the days of defeat, the days of. Here's the thing, you know, podcasting at 50, learning new shit is a pain in the ass. Like it is very difficult for me to wake up every day and want to learn something new. It hasn't been a rainbows and, you know, unicorn trail. And I work with a lot of 20, 25, 30-year-old people who are very savvy, second nature, all of this, you know, moving stuff around, and I have to tolerate a lot of egos. And I mean, like basically I feel like I'm eating crow at an age when I should be, you know, preparing to chill out.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that too has had a lot of rewards. So all of that wasn't in the pitch when Laura said, "Do you want to help me do this?" You know, but I've been able to find it along the way, and I think that came from sort of that idea of like, you know, everything offers a lesson in life. Everything offers me something. All the challenges, you know. I will say that the last thing I'll say about that, and I learned this from Laura watching her, was that as I've taken on these challenges and learned and been forced to learn more, I've learned to take defeats and criticisms as calls to action. That's been a big difference for me. I didn't grow up in a time where defeat or failure was a call to action. It was, I got punished a lot for it, and I got criticized for a lot for it, and pushed aside a lot for it. And I think Laura's like as a writer, she gets edits all the time, right? And I remember the first time she got the edits, and I'm like, oh shit, what are you going to do now? That sounds horrible. And she's like, I'm going to redo it. I'm going to do it with the edits. And I was like, oh really? That sounds exhausting. But now I'll see her do it 3 or 4 times. And so she says, you know, take criticisms, take failures as calls to actions, calls to change, and show up for it. And so if I can step by that now, I grow a lot more. And you know, and growing a company at 50 is a unique, you know, I feel like I'm in a unique space of my friend life as well. Like people of my age are looking to retire, and they're looking to, you know, buy a property outside the country, and we're still building at this point in our lives. So that's a little different, you know.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. What you were talking about with servant leadership, and I chant to myself when I'm in those growth moments, because you know, life just throws lifey things our way, and when I'm in it, I'm like, I'm growing, I'm growing, I'm growing, and I
Hmm.
literally chant that to myself when I'm dealing with something, and there's always something midlife, right? So
I'm stealing that one. I'm growing because I don't chant enough.
I do it so I don't go crazy. Just so,
Uh,
so I'm like, there's a lesson in everything, and this year has been an interesting one for me because I've had just as many highs as I've had lows, and I just keep saying I'm growing, I'm growing, I'm growing, and that's okay. So I love that. Never stop learning. All right, Laura, who are the women who have shaped you? I saw on Instagram you had a get together with your family recently, and
My mom.
yeah, your mom. So I was like, oh my gosh, how great is this? So I got to see some faces and all that. So yeah, I guess start there. Talk about your mom and then the other women who have made you who you are today.
Um, for sure, my mom is number one. What you saw was her 80th surprise birthday party. What you didn't see was the 20 minutes of dancing in the middle of it. I didn't post that, but I might still post that. And it's all her. She's dancing for
Oh,
20
you
minutes.
have to
Yeah,
post it.
yeah,
What's your
I
mom's
have to
name?
post it. Linda,
Linda. Happy
Linda.
80th, Linda. That's a big one.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. And so, my mom was born in 1944. She was born in Jim Crow, Chicago, and grew up, in the middle of segregation. And she had a really abusive home situation, and abuse in every way that you can use that word is what she experienced. Um, she got pregnant with me at 19 and married my dad to get out of her home situation. And she was a student at the University of Illinois at the time. And I was born 2 days before her 20th birthday. And I say all that, and I was also born in the Negro ward of the Illinois Research Hospital.
Interesting.
So that's another just like, timestamp for you, a milestone of when that was. That was 1964. And my mom had these experiences of how terrible it was to be Black in America. Um, this is what the world showed her. She was actually, when she was in labor with me, the white labor and delivery room was empty, but she had to wait in the hallway until the Negro one was available. I grew up in Cambridge, Mass. We left Chicago. It was just me and my mom. My parents were divorced at that time, and I just didn't know about racism until much later in life. She worked her butt off to protect me from the world. She gave me a world. I went to the Cambridge Montessori School, which is an independent school. I went there on scholarship, it would now be called financial aid. And I was the only Black person for a while in the entire school, but always in my class. And it was okay. It was like really okay. And we were absolutely like, church mouse poor, but we lived in a lovely neighborhood in a very small one-bedroom apartment. I got the bedroom, she slept in the living room. And, she just bent over backwards at every turn to make my life what hers wasn't. And I didn't really appreciate that until I was older, until I was refused service for the first time at a racist establishment, until I was called the N word by somebody driving by in a pickup truck with the Confederate flag, obscuring the back window, until I was charged more than my white peers at a restaurant because Black people don't tip. Like, she couldn't protect me from all those things, but I was an adult then. I did not experience any of what she grew up with until then. And the impact of what happened to her is absolutely still present. Like, she's still fragile around it, but she's also like got this thin core of steel that has made her this incredible survivor and thriver. She's an artist. She uses her art to show the world what her experience is, and we have a lot of her art hanging in our home. So by far, she is the person who has influenced me the most. She protected me in a way that I mean, I don't think anybody else could have protected me. My dad was also, really involved in my life, but he had gone to med school and he lived in another state. I visited him, but I didn't grow up with him. Um, He was also here this past
I
weekend.
saw,
He
yeah, I
was,
saw
he
that in
was
the
with
video.
me.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so my mom, she's phenomenal. And she literally, like, not literally, but figuratively threw herself on the sword so that I didn't experience the pain, and did it over and over and over again. Um, so she's number one. Um, Gosh, and I know this sounds like not a real answer, but like Toni Morrison and Alice Walker and Betty Smith and Judy Blume, and I mean, this was my world growing up.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have as big of or as strong connections with people as I did with these books that I read that shaped my world. I don't know how to do anything unless I've read about it in a book. Like, I just don't. And I don't know how I feel about it unless I write it down. Like reading and writing, my inhale, my exhale. And so these authors who I read over and over and over again, I still have my childhood books here in my home because they're so precious to me. They were tremendous influences on me. And yeah, I have 5 brothers and I have 2 sons. I have Scotty. I have this very male
Mm-hmm.
centric world that I live in, and I love it. I love the men in my life. Whenever anybody starts a sentence with, how men are, I'll be like, stop right there. I've got a great man at home. I have 2 great sons. I have a great dad, and I have 5 great brothers. So don't generalize men for me. Don't do that. But so I have this love for men. I'm very easy around them. Scott's daughters have also been a really big influence on how I am with women, because I don't typically go through the day thinking about women. Certainly they come up, but I'm not a girl's girl. Scott's much more of a girl's person than I am. Like, he has this, innate connection to women. If we go into a party, he's going to find a woman to talk to, and he'll probably stay there all night, and they'll have a great conversation. It's very easy for him to connect with women, and his girls have taught me how to soften around that, and to not be myself. I don't need to be anything for them. I can still be however I am in any situation, but I can also really see how, and let these two, Nora is 20, hun.
Thank you.
She's 20.
Yeah, it came to me when I stopped
Yeah.
thinking about it. But
But I've known her, Tony, since she was 3 turning 4. And, I just didn't know if I could develop a relationship with little girls. I was like, oh, girls, they're drama. They're like, I don't know if I want to hang out with girls. And not only do I love them, I call them my bonus daughters. But they helped me to really kind of season that feminine side of me, and respond to things that I maybe, like, in my friends I would have avoided. You know, I'm not a really emotional person. Scott's the crier in our family.
hey, now
I go years without crying.
you
And
can let
girls,
them figure it out. You don't have to tell them.
sorry.
I've got the tearjerker coming. It's written down now.
Uh-huh.
But they've helped me to see that, to see that vulnerability and not shy away from it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's been a big influence in not just my life, but my writing as well.
Yeah.
And so, and then I have a bunch of friends, Tony. We've been friends since we were in our 20s. We're on a text chain. They texted me 4 times during this. I love my friends. I love my girlfriends. They're all successful in the sense of the word that we all think about when we think about success, but they're also really great women. And most of them are moms, and they're really great moms. Like, it's a really nice group to be associated with.
Yeah, there's so much you said in your answer to. First off, I remember the first time I heard the N word. I think I was like 6 or 7 years old, and I was at my neighbor's grandparents' house, and they said the N word, and I didn't know what it meant. But it's like one of those things when you're a kid, you heard something that felt wrong, and I remember. Just picture me, but 6 or 7. I looked about like this, but like a little girl, kind of. Still short hair, by the way, because I loved my short hair. I was infuriated. And to this day, I can pull myself back to that memory. And I'm just like, I know nothing, like, I don't know what racism is. I don't know what any of that is, but I know it's in my mind, in my heart. And I believe it is fully wrong. And I get mad. I'm mad right now, just thinking about it. And I'm mad when I hear there was a Negro ward in the hospital. What the fuck was that? Like, that pisses me off so bad. So I just, I don't understand that way of thinking. And I'm so glad we progressed past that. But just some of the, how you were treated, Laura, and some of the things that I would never, like, ever think of treating someone that way, that people would treat you that way. Like, I just, it infuriates me. But again, why I do this work, why I'm so passionate about diversity, equity, inclusion, and I know you are too, because at the end of the day, we're all people. Like, we're all people. Who cares what the outside looks like, the meat suit? We're all people. So let's treat each other with kindness. So there's my soapbox moment. I had to get that out because I was like, Negro ward. I'm like,
I know, right?
I'm just so angry about this. I just, it's a good thing I was there, because I would have said so. I wasn't. I'd have been like, "What? Get this woman into the white people ward? Who cares? Like, she's having a baby, for God." Anyways,
Yeah.
what you talked about though with being a girl's girl, that's me. Like, I'm not that. It's not in my nature, right? And I gravitate, like, I can make, like, Scott and I would be talking to each other in a room if we were at a party, because we would gravitate towards one another, and it's easier for me. And I used to beat myself up for that, like, that I wasn't this, like, I don't know, girl's girl, like you were saying. And so, and part of me launching this podcast was about that, like, and I'm still working through that. I'm still untangling that thought knot in my head. But do you ever have that dialogue in your head about that? Like, why am I not a girl's girl? But you have all these female friends, so there's that kind of, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. The thing with my female friends and I, and Scotty knows this, is that we are absolutely friends, but they've had to accept me as I am because I don't like shopping recreationally. I don't enjoy it.
Yeah.
It gives me a headache. I don't love spa days. I don't want to spend an entire day at a spa with a group of women. I don't like sleepovers. I'm not trying to go on a 2-day girls trip anywhere. They all love that stuff. They love it. And so they're all not like me, you know, but I love them anyway, and they love me anyway. And certainly there was years, and that's, you know, part of what I write about in Stash, is I tried to pretend like I was a girl's girl. You know, I tried to pretend like I was all these things that I'm not, and it was literally killing me. I was, you know, it's why I ate Ambien and washed it down with booze, because I could be that way. I could be whatever I needed to be if I was fortified, you know, with these substances, but I couldn't on my own. And you know, and I paid a very large price for it, you know, in the form of an addiction, but also in the damage that addiction created. And so what I've done in recovery is to really just like, look, I got to be me the way that I am. First of all, I have to love myself this way. And secondly, if you don't love it, that's okay. You know, my feelings might be hurt and I might miss you, but I can't stick around and pretend to be something else. Which is, P.S., the maybe not the biggest thing that I value about my relationship with Scott, but it's one of the biggest, is that from the moment he saw me, he has never asked me to be anything other than what I am, either by word or deed. And the deed part is very important because a lot of people never said the words out loud to me, but their actions implied that I should be different.
Mm-hmm.
And Scott has never done that. So I at home, I don't have to change who I am, which is really freeing. And not only am I accepted, I'm loved for it. And what I found with my friends is they were like, no, we're not going anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
We're staying. We're just not inviting you to the spa.
I'm the same way. I wrote Hate Girls Weekend. The last girls weekend I went on, though, it was the last time I drank. And so I'm glad I went. But I'm like, it was quintessential white girl weekend, like Northern Michigan, drinking mocha choca bullshit lattes and like bonfires and then going to wineries. And Anyways, I too, but I tried to force that. Like I'm like, no, I can do this because hockey season was dark because it was the pandemic and all this stuff. And I was trying to be something that I wasn't. And it actually worked out in the best way possible because I didn't know it, but it was the last time I drank, and
Yeah.
wild horses couldn't drag me back to that version of myself. So I can relate to that, and I love that your friends love you for who you are and the way you are, and don't try to make anything other than that. And Scott too, which leads me to another question because this happened in my world periodically. So there was a player transaction. One of our longtime players went to our big a close team nearby, and why can't I think of the word right now? Rival. Dear Lord, Tony, a rival. You would have thought that the Kalamazoo Wings shut down. You know, like we're ceasing operations. I mean, the fans went ballistic, and I get it, fanatics and all that stuff. They're passionate, but the number of people that came after me. Now, this player chose on his own to go into a different team like this. So I get incinerated online, fire Tony Will, she's a clown, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. And it's right on, and my husband he's like, Tony, I don't know how this doesn't bother you. And I'm like, well, because I know it's not true. I'm not a clown, and I'm not going to give it any credit. So he's gone so far. He goes, I ordered some shirts yesterday. I go, okay, for what? And he took the K-Wings logo, and he's got like keyboard warriors, and he's got all this stuff on it that he thinks he's going to wear to the games this year because it infuriates him so much when people attack me, and
Yeah.
which I love about him because he does not want to change me. He loves me for me as I don't want to change him, and it's a beautiful thing. But Scott, if people are treating Laura in a different way or saying negative things about her online, which I'm sure has happened, how does that hurt you, and how do you feel about that? How do you respond in those situations?
It's interesting because I don't like your situation sounds a little bit more arbitrary and sort of people sort of attacked you on something that you literally didn't. So Laura does a lot of article writing for the Huffington Post, and I don't know if you've read the
I
Huffington
have,
Post or the
yes.
comments in the post. It is a playground for people who've never accomplished anything. The comments area for people who've never accomplished much in writing. It's like it really literally is where they spend all their time writing and gaining a following because each of the commenters has a profile within Huffington. So we find that a lot of the stuff about race that Laura writes about attracts people just really vile, hateful. Like you can tell sometimes people just literally read the title and go off on a whole tangent about it. Now, look, I want Laura to continue to write and be successful. And what I think I've come to understand, first of all, I started reading these comments and I was like, oh shit, we can't let Laura read these. Like these are awful. And then she would find her way into it and I'd be like, baby, you can't go there. And so what I've decided to do is sort of be the shield there in that thing. And what I do is I farm out the good comments that align with the purpose of the article. Like, so I'll,
Wait, last time there were like 5,000 comments and he read me one.
yeah,
That was
it was
only
perfect. It was
25.
perfectly aligned with the intention of the article. And I was like, baby, somebody got it. The other thing I'm finding in the world is that I literally think this type of the way people comment on things like that is like it's like everybody's riding in their car with the window up, screaming at one another. Like nobody's going to get retaliation. Nobody's going to face anybody face to face. So nothing really like the way I look at it, nobody really cares. Nobody, first of all, nobody really cares if you have an opinion. And secondly, I think it's good to stir up the pot. I think there is something good about because that's the beginning of change. Even if it's not change, I think it's the beginning of change because it's finding a nerve in people that touches them in a place that they don't have control of. And I think that is the beginning of change. So we continue to move forward and like I said, I kind of play the front for that. And I just continue to see Laura for her intention and her place because I know her truth and I know that there's no trying to slip anything around the backside of a meaning. And I also feel like I get a special seat because I am, um, you know, in a partnership with a strong, honest Black woman in America who, you know, has a perspective and an experience that not most of these people don't have. They don't even have access to it. They've never even really sat at a table with a person who's had that experience. So their opinion literally feels to me like somebody driving on the 405 who's having a really shitty day and they're just screaming out their window. And you can choose to listen to it or you can just drive by it. And that's what's been successful. Don't get me wrong, it hurts my feelings. I when it first started happening, I literally wanted to start a profile and started getting a bunch of writers to start attacking the other commenters. I was like, we'll get all my friends and we'll all start like
You sound
attacking
like
all these
Josh now.
people.
You sound like my husband. He's like, I'm
Uh,
going to start all these. And I'm like, Josh, it's not that big of a
yeah,
deal.
but I took a step back and I was like, look, that's just not the way to handle it. It wouldn't be good for me. And I think anybody, Laura and I have talked to a lot of other writers, and they're all like, never read the comments. just don't ever read them. Like just keep writing your thing and keep moving forward.
Yeah.
And the people who need to see it will see it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And it literally doesn't bother me. I too subscribe to the philosophy that if I'm not ruffling feathers, I don't do it intentionally. I don't go and say, let's dye the ice rainbow to piss off half of Kalamazoo. That's not what I'm doing. I'm doing it because hockey is for everyone. Everyone. That's what the rainbow represents. It's not just LGBTQ plus, that's a part of it, but it's about all things. And so I do it because I don't want to sound altruistic, but that's truly what it's about. So people can feel like they can come into a hockey game and feel safe, right? It's not because I'm trying to slip one by and be like, oh, I mean, I get actual hate mails, like handwritten hate mail that says, are you a gay man because you dyed the ice rainbow? And I'm like, I know it's confusing because I have short hair and my name is Tony, but nope, I'm not.
My God, that's
It's
ridiculous.
crazy. But we're doing the work, like all of us, we're doing our part to be like, no, this isn't okay. Like, let's learn. Let's just have a growth mindset and try and look at it from a different person's point of view. That's all.
yeah.
So,
Earlier when you asked me about women that influenced me, I would have to say that Laura's mother also, because when I first came around, she would tell the stories from the 40s, 50s, and 60s. And as a white male in this predominantly Black family, I found myself, doing that thing that white people do. We get defensive, you know? And it dawned on me after a while that really the biggest way I could support Linda was to listen. So I've learned from that from her that the best way to support it is to listen. And what happens is I get to hear these amazing stories from this generation of people that are not going to necessarily be around to tell the stories anymore. And like instead of sitting there like my kids looking at the mazel going, did that really happen? I actually have a context of a person who spent time in that period, and I can tell stories later or relate to that much better. So um, I don't know if that's necessarily pertinent, but I was thinking, the importance of hearing and being a part of something.
oh,
Uh,
100%. I can tell you how many times where I say to someone, usually my husband, or my dad sometimes, because my dad's 81. So I'm like, Dad,
mm,
I need you to hear me. Because we're talking about my mom's health. My mom has late stage Alzheimer's. So when you're talking about your mom, Scott, with MS and navigating through that, my mom's
mm,
definitely in the very late stages. And so my dad and I are navigating through this together. And I'm like, I just need you to hear me. Or I say to my husband, I just need you to hear me. And then I'll say with a capital H. And usually it lands.
mhm. Yeah.
So
Well, as men, we want to fix it.
you do.
That's our impulse is to fix. But I've learned by being surrounded by a lot of women that the best thing I can do is to listen and just let it filter through. And then if I can help later, that's fine. But if my impulse is to fix, then I can't hear you. You don't want to hear that either.
It's such great advice. I'm reading the book right now, Super Communicator, and it's talking about herd. It was three H's, hug, and I can't remember what the third H was, but it talks about just how to become a super communicator and things like that. And part of it is just I just want to be listened to. Help is the third H. with the, yeah. So what we're talking about big, like if I were to step back as we start to land this plane, because we could talk forever. I don't do the 2 hour podcast thing like some podcasters do, but not you guys because you don't either. But it's all about changing people's minds, right? And so one of the questions I asked my guests is, what have you changed your mind about lately? And I've got some really interesting answers. So you guys, I can tell you're both thinking. So Laura, I'm going to come to you. They have this thinking look.
I'm like, what have I changed my mind about? Um, let's see. I want to give you an honest answer here. Um, well, I think that lately, what I've changed my mind about, and this happened, and Scott knows this story after an experience I had at the DMV this summer, um, which was humiliating because I failed the driver's test, the written test, twice in a row. Like first day, second day, I went back and took it armed with what I thought I knew. I had studied and I still failed it. And the women behind the counter were like, "Honey, you failed again?" Like, there was this pity.
I was a little concerned.
Yeah, I'm like, oh, it hurts me.
No, no, now I got to start driving her. No, no.
Um, and and so what I learned, or what I changed my mind about, was I was in that experiencing this horrible experience. I'm humiliated, and I may fail this because this, like I said, it was all in one week. I may fail this a third time this week, and then have to wait and pay more money in order to start the process again. And this could go on for a long time. And it was like I was ashamed. I was humiliated. I was embarrassed. So I showed up that third day with my journal, and I decided I was going to flip the experience because I was stuck. I'm doing revisions on my second book, and I was stuck at a plot point. I had a plot problem that I didn't know how to solve. And instead of trying to solve it, and instead of avoiding the DMV, I studied. I went to the DMV with my journal, knowing I was going to have a wait, and I just wrote down. I observed people and wrote down what I saw, all the stories that I saw happening around me. And I went in and I passed that third time. And thank you. And then when I sat at my computer the following day, I was able to solve that plot issue. And not necessarily because of what I wrote in my journal, but I think the fact that I kind of just leaned into the experience and decided to use it as an opportunity, rather than a confirmation of my failure. And so I can change my mind in the moment. I can change how I view something. I do have choices now. Before, when I was in my addiction, I didn't have choices in the same way. And everything felt like survival. I didn't really have a choice to do this or this, no matter how badly I might want to. And now I have choices about leaning into situations, and I can change my mind. I can say the DMV is hell, or the DMV is great fodder for stories, and it might help me with something down the line or the next day, like it did.
Ah,
So
that's beautiful.
that's my change my mind story.
I love it. And it's the irony in some of this is I was at my parents' house today. Just I had to stop by, and I like to pop in and see them. And my dad, he's like, "Can you help me make an appointment at the DMV?" So I did. I go, "Yep, Dad, I got him online and I made an appointment." And then he goes, "Watch." And he got his iPhone out, and because he had a flip phone until like 2 years ago. He got his iPhone out. He goes, "I'm going to put it in my calendar." 81 years old, and he did it. And he was like, "Come on." My dad's name is Roger. He's like, "Come on, Roger, you can do it." It was so
Oh, so good.
so good.
That's so good.
I
I
love
salute
that.
that, Roger.
All right, Scott, what have you changed your mind about?
I guess mine's a little bit more profound, and it's been hitting me a little harder. I turned 56 in July. I've always been a fairly active person. I mean, basically my alignment with myself has always been around athleticism, and I've been struggling the last few years. I've had moments where I just, I've been a surfer. I'm a cyclist now. I've been many different things in my life, but those are the two things that I've kind of focused on. I found myself getting that diet, you're getting old, and the way I was talking to myself as like it's over kind of thing. And I've really decided, actually, I feel like this is a getting older thing anyway. It's like that I'm starting to give less of a shit about that idea
Mhm.
and just more about doing. So I've just really decided to focus more on how I take care of myself. You know, I think one of the biggest affirmations in my lifetime was that you can control the quality of your life as you age. You can eat well, you can exercise, you can stay active, you can, yeah, you can continue to put your date in your calendar, Roger, go Roger. You know, those things, they give you control of your experience. And I think I grew up in a time where I didn't believe that I had control of how it looked, you know, from this point forward. The other thing I do is I continue to try to find examples of people who have what I want down the road, people who are still showing up to work, people who are still surfing, people who are still riding their bike at an age where I think I would be done with it, and I model them and I try to, you know, I ask them questions. I'm curious about you know, sort of how they got there and how they maintain that. I do believe it is a meat suit, like you said, kind of thing. I hate that term, by the way, because,
I touched a
but I
nerve.
do believe that the spirit
Yeah.
and the body are separate. And I've spent a lot of time kind of in that space too, with meditation and sort of philosophy as far as my belief system in that. And it's been really helpful. To me, it's a day to day thing. It's not a one decision and then I'm all good. I still have to confront lots of different aspects of my life with that mentality, with that composure. But I literally, I just got a road bike, you know, and
What
I
kind?
went out for a ride this morning. What's
What
that?
brand?
I got a
Yeah.
specialized. I got a used, nicer, higher end
Yep.
one, as a Tarmac SL7. I'm stoked,
Yeah.
and I went out for a ride today, and it was so fast. I was like, I can do this.
It,
I can go fast.
you can.
And I had a gravel bike,
Yeah.
and it kind of limited how quick I was going. And I don't know, it's just something. Just small victories lead to a lot more freedom for me
Mhm.
now, in lots of areas of my life, not just in being athletic, but in learning, in showing up for other people. So it's yeah, that's been a little bit more profound, I think.
Yeah.
I'm glad I don't have to take the test at the DMV though, to be honest.
I that's impressive. I must be a California thing because in Michigan I haven't had to take a test since I was 16.
Yeah, Laura's
Yeah, you
confused
don't
by it
in
too.
other states. We found this out after I broadcast my humility
Well,
to my family.
well, the way to eradicate shame is to shed a light on it, right? That's a Brene
That's
Brown
right.
thing. So
That's
we
right.
tell the world,
Yeah.
right? And you're not the only
Mm.
one in the room. You're not the only one in that
Yeah.
room, Laura, failing DMV tests.
No, I was not. I was not. There were some other failures there with me.
Oh, hey, you're growing, you're growing, you're growing.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes.
Okay, so where can people find you if they want to connect with you, Laura, or you, Scott? Where would you like to direct people?
So my website is my name. It's Laura, Laura, Cathcart. No one knows how to say or spell that. Cathcart. And then Robbins, Robbins, Robbins. That sounded weird. Laura Cathcart Robbins is .com. It's all one word. LauraCathcartRobbins.com. On Instagram, I am at Laura Cathcart Robbins. That I have other social media. I'm never on it. I'm only ever on Instagram. And but you can find everything on my website, including the website for the only one in the room, which is where you would find Scotty.
Yes.
Yeah, that's where I'm at. I'm at the only one pod at gmail.com and dscott633 at gmail.com.
Great.
I'm dscotty633 on Instagram and Facebook. And I have a brand new podcast media company where I'm developing affordable podcasting production called R63 Pod Media, Podcast Media. So, yeah, you know, the emails are the best
Okay.
for me to get in touch with.
Yeah, and if anyone isn't, they can always come through me because I know how to get a hold of you guys too. So,
That's
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
yeah. Well, Scott, you mentioned something. I'm going to close with this. you mentioned surrounding yourself with people that have what you want. And I'm like, yeah. And that describes Laura to me. And just as an author and a woman that is continuing to speak up with diversity, equity, inclusion, and all the things you've accomplished, Laura, you have what I want. So I just want
Yeah.
to say that publicly. And I'm glad I'm surrounding myself with the right people. So, yeah, thank you for
Thank
being
you.
on, both of you. You're
Yeah.
fabulous.
Me
So
too. Thank you so much, Tony.
yeah, I just love you guys so much. So if you guys want to, if people want to find me, I'm everywhere. You know, kwings.com, TonyWillCoaching.com, Mindfulness Elevated. I'm on Instagram. I'm Tony Will. I'm on Facebook and LinkedIn at Tony Lentini Will. And until next time, I will see you soon.